Welcome back to the deep dive. I have to admit something right off the bat here.
Okay.
When I saw the stack of research for today's deep dive, I mean, we're talking articles, white papers, military manuals. My first instinct was to just grab a very, very large coffee.
I can imagine. It doesn't exactly look like light beach reading, does it?
No, not at all. We are looking at a subject that, on paper, it looks incredibly dry. We're talking about regulations.
Doctrine.
We're talking about military doctrine. We're even getting into the specific text of the United States flag code.
Yeah, that's usually where people's eyes start to glaze over.
Exactly. But, and this is a really big, but about 10 pages into the main source, which is this doctrinal analysis specifically about military funerals, I had this realization. I realized we aren't just reading a rule book. We're actually looking at a conflict.
Yeah.
It's a tension between two incredibly powerful forces that, they don't usually get along.
And what forces would those be?
Well, on one side, you have the human heart, grief, emotion, that desperate, just overwhelming need to honor a loved one who has passed away.
Right, the personal, emotional side of it.
And on the other side, you have doctrine, the cold, hard, unyielding text of federal law.
That's a very dramatic way to put it, but you're absolutely right. I mean, that's the core tension of military service in general, isn't it? The individual versus the institution.
It is. And today, we are stepping right onto hallowed ground to see exactly where that battle plays out. We are zooming way in on one incredibly specific, and I think often misunderstood, question of our military funeral honors. It's a question that might seem, trivial to an outsider, or maybe just a matter of aesthetics. But as we're going to find out, it goes right to the very core of what a standard actually means.
It's one of those little things that defines the difference between a military funeral and just, a nice funeral.
Yes, exactly. So here's the question, and I really want you, the listener, to answer this in your head before we give the answer away.
Okay, ready.
The question is, can you drape a United States flag over an urn during a funeral?
It sounds like a simple yes or no question.
It does. It really does. And I think if you just walked down the street and asked 100 civilians that question, 99 of them, maybe even 100, would say, well, yeah, obviously.
Why do you think that is? Why does it seem so obvious to people?
I think it's because of the movies. It's because of the news. We're all raised on this powerful imagery. We see the caisson rolling through Arlington National Cemetery. We see that casket completely wrapped in the flag, the blue field over the heart, tucked in just so. It's iconic. It's powerful. It just screams hero.
It's the visual we associate with ultimate sacrifice.
Exactly. So common sense logic would dictate that if the service member is cremated, you just shrink the tradition, right?
Yeah.
The vessel is smaller, so you drape the smaller vessel.
It feels respectful. It feels like you're just adapting the honor to fit the circumstance. You're thinking the body is in there, so the flag goes on the container holding the body.
Right. That's the common sense assumption. But, and here is the real hook for this entire deep dive, that assumption is wrong.
It is completely, legally, and doctrinally incorrect.
And we are looking at a white paper that is explicitly titled, "There is no authorization to drape an urn with the United States flag." And let me tell you, the expert who wrote this, they sound frustrated.
You can almost feel the frustration coming off the page. This isn't just a manual. It feels like a plea for sanity. It just cuts right through all the sentimentality and looks strictly at the regulations.
What are we talking about here?
The federal law, the Army regulations, the Navy standards, all of it. And the answer, across the board, universally, is no. There is absolutely no authorization to drape an urn with the U.S. flag.
Wow. That is a hard no.
Yeah.
And that's what we really need to unpack today, because if the answer is such a clear no, then why do I feel like I've seen it happen? I swear I've seen photos of draped urns.
You probably have, and that gets us right to the mission of this deep dive. We aren't just going to sit here and recite a rule book. We need to figure out why the rule exists, because there is a very good reason. And we need to explore this concept the author calls doctrinal drift.
Doctrinal drift. It sounds like a tectonic shift.
It is, in a way. It's all about how solid rules can erode over time. But, before we could even get to the drift, we have to establish the anchor. We need to look at the legal philosophy behind the U.S. flag code itself.
Okay, let's do it. Let's dive into the legal weeds. We're talking about Title 4 of the United States Code. This is the supreme law of the land when it comes to the flag.
Specifically, sections 1 through 10, this is the bedrock. Everything else is built on this.
Now, I read through Section 7, which is the part that deals with funerals, and I'm going to play the devil's advocate for a second.
Please do.
Or maybe the advocate for the sympathetic civilian. I read it, and it says, I'm quoting here, "The flag, when used to cover a casket, should be so placed that the union is at the head and over the left shoulder."
Correct. That is the text.
Okay, so it tells me very clearly how to cover a casket. But, and here's my argument, it doesn't say the flag shall only cover a casket. It doesn't explicitly say, do not cover an urn. It's silent on the topic of urns. So isn't that a loophole? Isn't silence basically permission?
That is the single most common argument that everyone makes in the field. It's the airbud defense, you know.
The airbud defense.
There's no rule in the book that says a dog can't play basketball, so it must be allowed.
Exactly. I use this with my diet all the time. My diet says eat vegetables.
Yeah.
It doesn't explicitly say don't eat 5 donuts at 2 in the morning. So technically the donuts are authorized.
In your diet, maybe that works. But in military law, and especially when we're talking about the flag code, that logic just fails completely.
Why?
Because the source material makes a really critical point here. The flag code is affirmative.
Affirmative. Okay, let's unpack that term. What does it mean for a law to be affirmative?
It means the code lists what is permitted. It operates on a permission-based model. It's not a list of prohibitions. It is a menu of authorization.
A menu of authorization.
Yeah, think of it like a very, very strict restaurant. The menu lists the dishes they serve. If you try to order something that isn't on the menu, say lasagna,
Right.
the chef doesn't say, well, the menu didn't explicitly say I couldn't make lasagna, so I guess I'll go make it. No. If it's not on the menu, it doesn't exist in that kitchen.
So the silence in the code isn't an open door. The silence is actually a solid wall.
Precisely. If the specific action, in this case, draping an urn, is not listed in the code, it is not authorized. The code describes the flag covering a casket. It does not describe the flag covering an urn.
Or a table, or a chair.
Or a podium, or anything else. Therefore, legally speaking, the silence regarding urns isn't some clever loophole. It represents a total and complete lack of authority.
But, okay, couldn't you argue that maybe they just forgot? I mean, when was this code written? Cremation wasn't nearly as popular back then as it is today. Maybe it's just outdated.
You could try to make that argument, but it falls apart when you think about the mechanics. If the code actually meant for urns to be draped, the writers would have been forced to describe the method.
What do you mean by the method?
Think about the physics of it. A casket is a pretty standard shape. It's a big rectangle, roughly 6 feet by 2 feet.
Okay.
The standard interment flag is 5 feet by 9.5 feet. The geometry just works. It drapes naturally and looks dignified. But an urn...
Urns are the Wild West of funeral containers. I mean, I've seen cubes, cylinders. I've seen ones shaped like books.
Exactly. They come in every conceivable shape and size. If the code intended for us to drape them, it would have to answer all the logistical questions that come with that.
Like what?
Like, how do you fold a giant flag to fit a tiny 6-inch box? Do you use pins to hold it in place? Do you just tuck it all underneath? Do you let 5 feet of priceless fabric drag on the floor?
Yeah, it would be a tripping hazard at a funeral. That's not good.
And the code says nothing about any of this. The definitive stance from our source is that nothing in 4 U.S.C. sections 1 through 10 supports draping an urn. The silence is intentional because the flag simply isn't designed physically to be used that way.
Okay, so that's the federal law. That's the big boss, the top of the pyramid.
Right.
But the military is a massive bureaucracy. It has a million different regulations. Surely one of the branches has decided to, I don't know, modernize this.
You'd think so.
I mean, the Army, Navy, Air Force, they all have their own specific cultures. You'd think maybe the Navy has a different take because of burials at sea and tight spaces on ships.
You would think so. You'd expect to find some localized policy somewhere that says, okay, here's our modern adaptation of the federal law. But this is where the source material takes us on a fascinating tour of the services, and the result is, well, it's incredibly consistent.
Let's walk through them then, because I think people listening probably assume there's some variance. Let's start with the Army. They're usually the most by the book, right?
Oh, absolutely. For the Army, we look at AR 84010. This is the regulation that governs flags, heraldry, that kind of stuff. And the wording is incredibly specific. It says, the interment flag covers the casket.
Singular, the casket.
Casket, not casket or urn, just casket. And the army views the flag in a binary state during a funeral. This is a really important concept to visualize.
Okay.
In an army funeral, the flag is either state A, fully covering a casket, or what else is it doing?
It's folded. It's that perfect triangle.
Exactly. It is folded into that recognizable triangular shape. In army doctrine, there is no middle ground. There is no in-between state. You don't have a loose flag just kind of hanging around or bunched up.
So it's either performing that solemn duty of covering a body in a casket,
Or it is folded and being prepared for presentation to the next of kin.
so visually, if I were at an army funeral for cremated remains, I would never see a flag draped over anything.
Never. You would see the urn, probably on a small table or a pedestal, and the flag would already be folded into a triangle. It would likely be carried by a soldier or resting on a stand next to the urn, but never ever covering it.
Okay, that's the Army. Crystal clear.
Uh-huh.
What about the Navy? You mentioned they have their own language for things. Do they drape the urn for a burial at sea?
The Navy is actually even more specific about the logistics, which makes sense given their environment. We're looking at a document called NV Piers 15555D. It's the Manual for Military Funerals.
And what does it say?
It details exactly how to handle cremains. And it says, quote, only 2 body bearers are needed to transport the urn and folded flag.
And folded flag. It
Yeah.
specifies the state of the flag right there in the transportation instruction.
It does. It treats them as 2 separate, distinct objects that are moved together, and then it gives placement instructions. It says the folded flag is placed on the stand beside the cremains.
Beside. Not on top of, not wrapped around. Beside.
The visual separation is mandated by the regulation. The flag remains a folded triangle. The urn remains bare. There is no mixing of the 2 symbols.
That seems pretty definitive. So Army and Navy are in complete lockstep. Let's check the Air Force. They're often seen as the most, I don't know what's the word, the most flexible branch. Or maybe the most corporate.
Maybe in some things, but not this. The Air Force Honor Guard Manual, that's AFMMN 34515, is extremely prescriptive. I mean, it's a manual for a reason.
Right.
It breaks down the roles of the pallbearers with almost surgical precision. It says the NPB always carries the flag.
NPB.
That's the non-commissioned officer in charge of the pallbearer team. So one person, the leader, is designated to carry the flag.
Okay, so one person has the flag.
And the full, that's another designated team member, carries the urn.
So they are physically separated even during the movement, during the walk.
Correct. One human being has the urn. A completely different human being has the folded flag. The flag is not a wrapper. It's an accompanying symbol. It walks with the remains. It does not contain the remains.
It's a companion, not a covering.
That's a great way to put it.
And just to round it all out, what about the Marines and the Coast Guard?
It's the exact same story. We looked at MCO P3040.4 for the Marines and COMMD TNST M1770.9 for the Coast Guard. Both of these documents talk about the logistics of urns, how to buy them, how to ship them, things like that, but neither one contains a single sentence authorizing draping. It's just not there.
So we have what the expert in our source calls cross-service consistency.
It's really remarkable. I mean, despite all the different uniforms, the different service songs, the different traditions, on this one specific point, every single branch agrees.
Wow.
Caskets are draped, urns are accompanied by a folded flag, and that flag is eventually presented to the next of kin. The lack of authorization is totally uniform and, you have to conclude, completely intentional.
It is interesting because when you lay it out like that, it feels so deliberate. It's not like they all just forgot to update their rules for cremation. It feels like a very specific design choice about the symbology of the flag.
It is, and that's a great transition because it leads us right to the physics and the philosophy of the flag itself.
Great.
Because I think part of the urge to drape the urn, the reason people want to do it, it comes from a desire to make the flag look bigger, maybe, or more prominent in the ceremony.
Yeah, let's be honest about the optics for a second.
Yeah.
You're at a funeral, emotions are running incredibly high. You see a casket, and it's this massive field of red, white, and blue. It dominates the room. It screams, "This matters."
Right.
Then you see an urn. It's a small box.
Right.
And next to it is a small folded triangle of a flag. To the grieving family, it feels small.
That's a very real, very human reaction. We equate size with honor. We want the display to fill the room to match the size of our grief. But the source material breaks down the flag's states of being in a really interesting way.
Okay.
It argues there are only 2 authorized ceremonial states for the flag at a funeral.
State A and State B.
Exactly. State A is unfolded. This is when it's fully draped over a casket, pulled tight and proper, or when it's on a halyard, flying in the wind, or when it's being held open by a team during a flag retirement ceremony. In State A, the flag is open, it is flat, it is expansive.
So state B.
State B is not unfolded, which, for our purposes, means it's the folded triangle. It's being carried by a bearer. It's placed respectfully beside the remains. It's a neat, compact, dignified object.
So when someone tries to drape an urn, what state is that flag in? Is it A or B?
It's neither. They are inventing what the source calls a phantom state. They're creating a semi-unfolded condition that doesn't exist in any doctrine. Think about it physically. To drape a small box like an urn, you can't just lay a 5 by 9.5 foot flag over it.
No, it would look like a heap of laundry on the floor. It would be a mess.
Exactly. It would drag. It would look sloppy and undignified. So what do people do? They start improvising. They fold it in half or maybe in quarters, or they kind of bunch it up artfully around the base of the urn.
They're essentially doing origami with the flag to make it fit.
That's precisely what they're doing. And the source argues very forcefully that this partial drape condition simply does not exist in doctrine. You are manufacturing a new physical state for the flag that has no definition, no procedure, and no precedent.
But why does that distinction matter so much? I can hear a listener right now saying, come on, guys.
Yeah.
Who cares if it's a phantom state, if it looks nice and the family appreciates it?
It matters because of the solemnity of the symbol. The flag isn't just a piece of cloth. It represents the entire nation. The rules for its handling are supposed to be dignified and, above all, precise. When you start improvising, folding it sort of this way to make it fit a box, you are fundamentally diluting the meaning of the two authorized states. You're treating the flag like a piece of decorative fabric rather than a rigid national symbol.
Decorative fabric, that hits hard. You're turning it into a tablecloth, essentially, instead of a standard.
That's the risk. When you depart from the authorized states, you lose the dignity that comes from the precise, practiced movements that define military honor. You're just making it up as you go.
So, okay, this is the part that's really bugging me. If the rules are this clear, if the federal law says no, and every single service branch says no, and the actual physics of the flag make it awkward anyway, how is this even happening? Because the source material was clearly written because this is happening. People are draping urns.
This is where we get to the really juicy part of the analysis. We get to the loophole, or I should say, the perceived loophole.
The Trojan horse.
The Trojan horse of local authority.
Okay, let's unpack this. The source points to a specific document called TC 321.5. What is that?
That is a training circular for the Army, specifically about drill and ceremonies. And deep inside that document, there's a provision that allows NCOICs, that's non-commissioned officers in charge, to develop unit funeral detail standard operating procedures.
SOPs.
SOPs, standard operating procedures. Every workplace has them.
Right. Here's how we close up the store at night. Here's how we file this report, that kind of thing.
And the regulation basically says, hey, local units, you need to write down your procedures for how you're going to run a funeral detail.
Which, on its face, makes perfect sense. You need to have a plan. You need to know who drives the van, what time to show up, how to press your uniform.
Right. It's all about logistics and administration.
But this is where the misunderstanding happens.
This is the critical error. Units think this authority to write down their administrative plan gives them the right to invent ceremonies. They think, oh, the regulation says I can write an SOP. Great, I'm going to write an SOP that says we drape the urn because it looks better and the families like it.
Ah, I see it now. They're confusing administrative authority with ceremonial authority.
Spot on. The source clarifies this beautifully. It says SOPs are for administration, not for innovation.
So what's the list of things an SOP can actually do? What's in the approved lane?
An SOP can and should detail personnel assignments. It can set up training rotations for the team. It can give driving instructions and maps to the cemetery. It can handle the certification process, checking that your soldiers are ready and look sharp. These are all logistical things.
And what can it absolutely not do?
It cannot alter the established flag handling standards. It cannot introduce new unauthorized ceremonial practices. It absolutely cannot expand the uses of the flag beyond what is written in higher level doctrine.
There was a phrase that jumped out at me from the experts' notes on this. It was, local SOPs implement doctrine. They do not create doctrine.
That is the golden rule right there. That should be written in big, bold letters on every NCOIC's desk. You are there to execute the national standard, not to write your own version of it.
But they do.
They do. And this is where we run headfirst into this concept of doctrinal drift.
Doctrinal drift. It sounds like a sci-fi term, but it's very real, isn't it?
It's when local habits, repeated over time, slowly and quietly replace the actual written standards. It happens in every organization you can think of, but in the military, with things this sacred, it's particularly dangerous.
So how does it start? What are the causes?
The source identifies a few key causes. One is just delegated authority without proper oversight. You let a local sergeant run the funeral detail for 3 or 4 years, and no one ever really checks in on him to see how he's doing it, just that he's getting it done.
And he starts doing little things his own way.
Maybe he saw it done differently somewhere else, or he just thinks his way is better, and then he teaches the new guys his way.
And then they teach the next guys. And suddenly, after a few years, his way is just the way we've always done it here.
Exactly. The institutional memory of the correct procedure is gone. Another cause they mentioned was certification that focuses on readiness rather than precision.
What does that mean?
It means the command sergeant major comes down to check the team before they go out. He asks, is your uniform clean and pressed? Are you on time? Is the van gassed up? He's checking the logistics. He doesn't necessarily ask, show me exactly how you handle the flag for an urn. As long as they show up and look sharp, they get a passing grade. The details of the ceremony itself go uninspected.
But the biggest one, and the one that I think I resonate with the most, is the emotional justification.
This is the human element, and it's the hardest one to argue against. You're at a funeral, you have a grieving widow, she's in tears, and she looks at you and says, please, can you just put the flag over the urn? It would mean so much to me and my family.
And you're that 25-year-old sergeant. All you want to do is be respectful. You want to honor the family. You want to ease their pain.
Exactly. You think, what's the harm? It's a respectful gesture. So you do it. And in that moment, it feels like the absolute right thing to do. But the expert's philosophical point here is absolutely crucial. If an unauthorized procedure is written into a local SOP, or if it's just done on the spot out of kindness, it doesn't make it legal. All it does is record deviation.
It records deviation. So you're not creating a new standard, you're just creating a written record that you broke the rules.
And you are setting a terrible precedent. Because next week, that family tells their neighbor, who's also a veteran, oh, the honor guard did this beautiful thing where they draped the flag on the urn.
Right. And then the neighbor expects it at their family member's funeral.
And if the next honor guard team follows the rules and doesn't do it, now who looks like the bad guys? Who looks disrespectful?
They look like they care less. Or like they're being lazy.
Exactly. By bending the rules to be nice, in one instance, you are actually undermining the standard and creating a difficult situation for everyone who comes after you and tries to do it right.
This brings us right to the next section, which is the absolute necessity of uniformity. Because I think some listeners might still be thinking, okay, you guys are being really pedantic about this. Who really cares if the flag is on the urn or next to it? The soldier is gone. The family is sad. Just let them have their moment.
It's a valid pushback. It's an emotional argument against a procedural one. Why is this rigidity so important?
The source has a great line on this. It says, uniformity in military funeral honors is not optional. It is foundational. Why? Why foundational?
Because these are United States military honors. They aren't the 3rd Battalion's honors. They aren't the local VFW's honors. They represent the promise of the entire nation to all of its service members.
So if every individual unit invents their own way of doing it, the national standard just collapses into chaos.
The legitimacy of the honor depends on its consistency. Imagine if you went to a court of law and the judge just decided to make up a new procedure on the spot because he thought it felt nicer for the defendant.
You would lose all faith in the justice system immediately.
The same principle applies here. When a family in California receives that folded flag, it needs to mean the exact same thing and be performed in the exact same way as the honor a family in Alaska receives or a family stationed in Germany receives.
It stops being a United States honor and it starts being just a local unit honor.
Precisely. And our source argues that true honor, real honor, comes from that strict adherence to the code. There is a profound dignity in the discipline itself.
Can you expand on that?
Sure. When you watch the changing of the guard at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, why is it so powerful?
Because it is perfect. It's exact.
Yeah.
Every step is measured. Every movement is precise.
And rigid. It is uncompromising. And that rigidity is the expression of respect. If the guard started improvising or smiling at the crowd or changing the steps to be friendlier, the whole thing would lose its power, wouldn't it?
It would become a performance, not a vigil.
Exactly. The same is true for the funeral. The discipline of the honor guard, their strict adherence to the national standard, is the honor.
That's a really powerful reframing. Rigidity isn't about being mean or bureaucratic. It's about maintaining the symbolic weight of the ceremony.
Yes, and there's a real risk of variance. If we allow this drift on something as fundamental as the flag, what's next? We end up with a fragmented military culture where honors mean different things in different places.
Okay, so we've identified the problem, the root causes, and the philosophy behind the rules. Now, let's talk solutions. The white paper doesn't just complain. It offers a concrete 5-point plan to fix this.
Right. It's not enough to just point out the problem. How do we stop the drift?
Point number 1 is simple: clarification memos.
This is the easiest, most direct solution. The headquarters of the service branches, the Army, Navy, Air Force, all of them, need to send out a simple one-page memo.
What does it say?
It says, in plain English, stop draping urns. This is not an authorized procedure. The flag will be folded and placed beside the cremains.
Just clear the air. Remove all ambiguity.
Right. Stop forcing junior leaders to interpret the silence of the flag code from the 1940s. Just say it out loud in a 2024 memo.
Okay, that's step 1. Point 2, better certification.
We touched on this earlier. The people who are responsible for checking the teams, the command sergeants major, the senior NCOs, they need to check for ceremonial compliance, not just logistical readiness.
So don't just check the uniform.
Don't just check the uniform. Ask the NCOIC, walk me through it, demonstrate the urn arrival for me. And if they pull out a flag and try to drape it over a box, they fail the inspection.
You have to inspect what you expect.
Exactly. You make precision part of the grade.
Makes sense. Point number 3 is template language for SOPs.
This is about helping the local units do the right thing. If you are going to tell them to write an SOP, give them a standardized template to start with.
And in that template,
You include anti-expansion clauses. You have a line that's already typed in that says, this unit will not deviate from AR 84010 regarding flag positioning during funeral honors. Make it part of the boilerplate text they have to use.
so you make it harder for them to write the wrong thing in the first place. You guide them to the right answer.
Correct. You build the guardrails right into the paperwork.
Smart. Point number 4 is training.
This is the intellectual piece of the puzzle. You have to teach the hierarchy of authority. It's a simple civics lesson, really.
What's the hierarchy?
Federal law, like the U.S. flag code, trumps Department of Defense regulations. DoD regulations trump Army regulations. And Army regulations trump a local SOP written by a sergeant in an office.
They need to understand that they don't have the power to overrule Congress just because they wrote it down in a binder in their unit.
Precisely. They are at the bottom of the doctrinal food chain, not the top.
And finally, point number 5, which I found really interesting, first responders.
Yes. This is about widening the aperture. Police and fire honor guards, they often look to the military for their standards. They copy the uniforms, the drills, the movements.
So if the military drifts, the police and fire departments drift too.
And sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes a military team sees a local police honor guard doing something that looks cool or sharp, and they copy it, not realizing it's not authorized in military doctrine.
So there's cross-pollination of bad habits.
Exactly. The source encourages proactively sharing the correct military standards with first responder programs to prevent that cross-sector confusion. We want a unified look and feel for all uniformed services honoring their fallen.
It's about creating a culture of excellence and precision that extends beyond just the active duty military.
Absolutely. The standard should be the standard, no matter the uniform.
So let's just take a moment here and summarize what we've really learned in this deep dive.
I think the core facts are pretty indisputable at this point. The U.S. flag code allows draping caskets, but it says nothing about urns.
And that silence is a wall, not a door.
Right. And no branch of the U.S. military authorizes draping an urn. In every single case, for a cremation, the doctrine says the flag should be folded into a triangle and placed respectfully beside the urn.
And the reason for this isn't just because rules are rules, it's a deeper thing. It's because the flag has specific authorized states of being.
State A, open. State B, folded.
And you cannot just invent a semi-draped state C just because it feels good in the moment.
And we learned that local SOPs, those standard operating procedures, they are for administration. They cannot be used to rewrite national doctrine.
I just keep coming back to that one quote from the source material. Uniformity is not rigidity. It is preservation of meaning.
That is the big takeaway, isn't it? When we preserve the form of the ceremony, we preserve the meaning behind it. If we let the form dissolve into 100 different local variations, the national meaning dissolves right along with it.
It's a really powerful lesson about the danger of good intentions. We all want to be kind. We all want to be respectful. But sometimes the most respectful thing you can possibly do is hold the line and maintain the standard.
True respect is doing the thing right every single time, even when it's hard or even when it feels a little less showy. It's about honoring the history and the statutes that gave that flag its weight and its power in the first place.
It really makes you look at a funeral differently. The next time you see a military ceremony, you'll be looking for that folded triangle next to the urn.
And if you see it, you'll know that's not a lesser honor. That is the standard. That is the discipline. That is respect.
So here's a final provocative thought for you to mull over as we sign off. We've talked a lot about how these small deviations happen because they feel nice or respectful in the moment. But if we allow those small deviations, at what point does the ceremony lose its connection to its history entirely? If a local unit can change the flag rules because they feel like it, can they change the uniform? Can they change the 21-gun salute to 22 because it sounds better? Can they change the bugle call from taps to something else? At what point does it stop being a military funeral and start being just a personalized performance?
That is the dangerous slope. And it's why these white papers, as dry as they may seem on the surface, are so incredibly vital. They're the anchor that stops that drift.
Thank you for listening to this deep dive. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you next time.